Hello and welcome to Empires of Aether, the next great turn-based strategy board game that allows you to wield power of an element of your choosing, vying control, a new power, a new element, a new land. Aether. I think that's how it goes. I promise you, while we've been away, did not one day go by that I not think about the elements. As you can see, we've had a change in scenery behind us. Lots of life changes. But dang it, if the elements didn't still fuel my very soul. And I gotta admit something. There was something eating away at me after the last update where I said the game was complete. It's always ate at me because it honestly started as an April Fool's joke. And that's Umami. Umami was literally just a running joke between a friend of mine, you might know him as Darth Aether, and myself, where we just made one little quip. And 2 hours later, the element Umami was born, but it never felt right. The game didn't feel right. It wasn't complete. And so today, we have the true completion of the game. Umami, yes, will make a return during those April Fool's type events that, of course, we'll have in the full version of the video game that Aether Studios will bring to you eventually. But the element that will complete the circuit going back to set 3 is Shadow. Not a blue shadow, not a red shadow, Shadow. And I took a lot of inspiration from what the original inspiration of this game was, and that is a real-time strategy game. Age of Empires, my very first video game ever. The Lakota Nation, or the Sioux Nation as it was originally called, is one of my favorite nations to play in that game. And it inspired me to dive into what their culture was back in the day. And the Lakota are all about being on the move, hunting the buffalo on the great open plains. But what binds them all together are the spiritual ancestral lands known as the Badlands. One of the fundamental issues with the game is a struggle to attain building materials in specific corners. And so a new basic tile is being added to bring more balance to the game. Badlands, 5 building materials to purchase them. They provide 2 building materials per turn, but you cannot put a resource building on it. I like that flavored text, and might potentially add it to deserts and swamps, but there are some situations where putting a resource building, very rarely do we want to put resource buildings on them. Is it ever the right move? But I kind of like Badlands restricting you into it. But Shadow wants to get some Badlands here. It's a cheaper tile for the output here, but you can't really bolster your economy into the mid to the late game with it. I like it. I like what it's going to do. And it still increases versatility of other nations with Badlands in their corner. But Shadow likes them. Badlands are going to provide 1 additional building material, which means they're going to get 3 from them. But the real gimmick here is that their general is a shaman that is going to place totems around the map. One of the bullet points here, Totem of the Shade, you're going to get a guaranteed tier 1 ability that's not going to count in your 3 that you are selecting. And then you get different thresholds for placing different amounts of totems down, much like the Sand Nation gets with their numbers of deserts in play here. Here's the first set of their abilities. Tier 1, of course, you got a standard tile swapperoo here, swapping one of your poor lesser tiles into a Badlands tile that's going to benefit you in a couple different ways, depending on what abilities you're taking. And then we get our Does It Have Wheels? Once again, that Lakota Nation, all about that nomadic nature, being able to pack it up and move on to the next destination where the hunting is ripe. The Shadow Nation is going to be a more aggressive nation here. At least that's the goal. We'll see what we're able to accomplish here. I'm seeing win conditions being perhaps 10 armies here. The ability to kill bosses in the mid-game, but also stifle some early-game aggression here with a couple of other abilities that we're going to see that they have at their disposal. But anyways, Does It Have Wheels? Able to pack up their barracks, move it to a more aggressive position. Death's Whisper, able to stop those early-game pushes from your lightning, your glaciers, your fires, eliminating up to 3 soldiers on 2 separate turns as long as you're next to your general. Reaping Ceremony, all revolving around controlling multiple totems. However, if the game gets dire early on, you can pop it earlier on to get some advantage cards to put yourself back into the game. And we see our first couple of totems here. And Totem of the Shade is the one that you get guaranteed every single game. You don't have to take it as a tier 1. Place this totem on the tile your general is on. That is how every totem is going to work. You have to place it where your general is. This tile does not count for your unit's movement when passing through it. Interesting movement here. Very tactical placement of this totem is required in order to take advantage of that mid-board spacing here. Totem of the Harvest, I think, is going to be a pretty consistent tier 1 take that you're going to bring into most games, unless you're in a 16-16 or 20-20 position, but it's simply going to double the resources. This does not count as a resource building on that tile, so you could see some juicy combinations here. Another thing to mention, although it is on the large card, you can only have one totem on each tile here. And if Shadow ends up being in the 10, 10, or 13, 13 slot, maybe you want to consider taking Shaman's Negotiations, purchasing your first 2 tiles that your general touches for half price. So you don't get the flexibility of getting to wait to use these for 2 more expensive tiles. No, it's going to be the first 2 ones that they can encounter. However, it cannot be a star tile. But it's a pretty good lock for a 10-10 Shadow player here. Then going into Tier 2, where we left off the last time we were touching this game is we really wanted to make Monuments more relevant. So Monuments still have that free placement cost as long as you are buying that star tile once you are already Tier 2. The Shaman Hut is going to allow you to duplicate your totems, and this is how you can achieve those 3, 4, 5 totems placed bonuses without necessarily taking 5 totems as your 9 ability slots, which is really, really pivotal here. So for a modest price, you can duplicate tiles, and as it stands right now, you can place them on any owned tile. So this is the one loophole to not having to place them where your general is sitting. Totem of the Warrior is going to be a simple Badlands buff our attacking dice roll. The reason why I don't see this as getting out of hand really quickly, unless of course a corner is just entirely Badlands, is you're having to sacrifice 2 ability slots to get more Badlands in your corner, which means you're getting less totems, which means you have less late game accessibility for yourself. And so it's really going for that early game aggression versus going for that late game totem heavy play that you're going to see. Great Hunt, another way to capitalize on our Badlands play. So I do see 2 different builds here. One kind of just pushes totems to the side, uses them as a little bit of a bolstering effect, but the rest of it is just revolving around the Badlands here. Knight Rider, very interesting ability. I think the text has to be tweaked just a little bit, but it's a way to effectively attack in between turns. I don't see this being useful in every single matchup, nor would it be useful in every single game, even against those positive matchups, but it's certainly a way to get a sneaky win by killing an opponent's capital. So very interesting planning there. So imagine if you're a 10-10 player lining up next to your opponent. You don't want to give all your cards away. You want to let your opponent commit on the other side of their playing field. You see that they commit all their resources over there, blow all their advantage cards, blow all their abilities, leaving themselves open. You use Knight Rider between that turn, and then you are the first turn player in the next cycle to effectively get a double attack there. That's how I see Knight Rider being used, and it's another thing that your opponent has to contemplate when making their decisions on their own turn. Shrouding Haze, I like the concept of it. I like the visualization, really pairing well with this shadow aesthetic that we've got going on for. Just making your opponent have to double check, do they have the numbers to battle, contend with my position here. Totem of the Dread is going to lower your opponent's dice roll within 2 tiles of it. So you're seeing a pretty consistent thing. As the totems get more powerful, they also kind of want to get further and further away from your capital, the safety of home, which means they're at risk of being taken by your opponents. Haunt is going to be a mirage effect like Sand, where you're just duplicating soldiers. Pack It Up is going to be like the Nomad's advantage card. Absolutely is this a copy of it, but you get to do it in Tier 2, which is pretty cool. You're facing that early game aggression. Maybe you can exchange aggression for your own, but also buy yourself a couple of turns of safety using Pack It Up. Death Speaker is going to be another exsanguinate type ability, but instead of bolstering your general's passive strength, it's going to draw you advantage cards. Totem of the Valley is going to enhance your building material production to scale you into that Tier 3 late game. Totem of the Lost, interesting here. place it towards the middle of the board, and you're letting opponents just battle. Armies that are slain, whether it's your own or theirs, are going to generate food for you. Interesting there. And then, we'll release this later. Another set for Shadow already in the works. Another theme to it that I'm excited for. But we get into Tier 3, and you could probably predict it. Their quest as of right now is to control a specific amount of totems to earn 6 victory points. If you haven't seen our updates, no longer is the goal to get 2 win conditions. The goal is to get 10 victory points, and different accomplishments and achievements are going to earn you different victory points in that front. Controlling 6 totems, I think, is pretty difficult to do, especially if you want to capitalize on those effects that they're going to achieve, because that means your general has to get out there. Secondly, they have to be a little bit further from your base, and so you're susceptible to aggression there. Wendigo is going to be a Native American mythological creature, a myth of the woods. You don't want to go into the lands that you don't know of, because the Wendigo is going to eat you. For every totem you've got, your general is going to be a little bit stronger. Totem of the Beyond, a sort of smelter effect, without having to invest in an ore tile and then a smelter effect. We get to just place it where our general is, and we're getting a free army every single turn. Dance of the Dead is if we're going with that Badlands heavy build, we get to spawn armies for every Badlands that we have. We've got Totem of the Mist, which is going to deny movement abilities, all too important. And imagine if you have invested in your Shaman Hut to duplicate your Totem of the Shade, you've got a lot of movement potential there, while also negating everything that their class might bring until this tile is taken here. And then we've got our Spectral Possession, longest text one. It is a counter in specific matchups, right? If you're thinking the Abominable Snowman, the Blood matchup, you are going to remove your general from the game, take control of their general or non-soldier creature, and use it for your own battle. So you're taking away a potential win condition for them, using it for your own, really just demolishing their strategy there. But it's not going to be used in every single matchup. Only going to be used in specific matchups here. And of course, you got your announced, your weathers that are going to pair with it. This is the Shadow Nation. How do you see it lining up with what the game was? And I'm very excited to get the people back around the table, because now I'm very excited about all 16 elements. Let's see you out there. The next great turn-based strategy board game, Empires of Aether.